Państwu. Ja się nazywam Jacek Kucharczyk, jestem prezesem Instytutu Spraw Publicznych, czyli jednej z organizacji dzisiejszej konferencji, dzisiejszego spotkania, które zatytułowaliśmy Krajobraz po bitwie, co wyniki wyborów do Parlamentu Europejskiego mówią o stanie polityki europejskiej. Wydaje mi się, że tytuł sam siebie tłumaczy. Chcemy spojrzeć na wyniki ostatnich wyborów europejskich, zarówno z perspektywy krajowej, to nie tylko polskiej, ale właśnie różnych krajów członkowskich Unii Europejskiej, w których te wybory się odbyły, ale także zastanowić się, co to oznacza dla Unii Europejskiej, dla stanu polityki na tym poziomie wspólnym, europejskim. I żeby zorganizować tę konferencję, czy naszą konferencję zorganizowaliśmy w ramach trwającej współpracy z ważnymi partnerami, którym chciałbym tutaj bardzo serdecznie podziękować. Zacznę od Warszawskiego Biura Fundacji imienia Eberta, z którą to fundacją od wielu lat zajmujemy się i wyborami europejskimi, analizowaliśmy wspólnie wyniki poprzednich wyborów i debatowaliśmy nad nimi, a także różnymi ważnymi kwestiami europejskimi w ramach takiego cyklu Pytania o Europę, więc to nasze dzisiejsze spotkanie wpisuje się właśnie w ten cykl spotkań, gdzie próbujemy rozmawiać w szerokim gronie na temat tych najważniejszych wyzwań dla Unii Europejskiej, dla współpracy europejskiej. Więc serdecznie dziękuję Fundacji za tą trwającą współpracę. Po drugie, spotkanie w tej formie nie byłoby możliwe bez współpracy czołowych europejskich think tanków, które kilka lat temu połączyły swoje siły w ramach takiego projektu, który nazywamy EPIN, czyli European Policy Institutes Network. I to jest taki projekt, w ramach którego eksperci z całego szeregu think tanków zajmujących się analizą polityki europejskiej prowadzą spotkania, ale także prace analityczne, jeśli chodzi właśnie o stan europejskiej polityki i stan europejskiej demokracji. To nie jest takie pierwsze spotkanie, odbywały się kolejne. Ostatnio spotykaliśmy się i debatowaliśmy w Kopenhadze, przedtem w Atenach i bardzo się cieszę, że tylu kolegów mogę tutaj i koleżanek powitać w Warszawie na tym spotkaniu. Bardzo się cieszę, że będziemy mogli ich wiedzę wykorzystać w naszej dzisiejszej dyskusji, usłyszeć perspektywy właśnie ekspertów z wielu krajów członkowskich i także zastanowić się właśnie nad tą perspektywą ogólnounijną. Ten projekt jest koordynowany przez taki bardzo ważny brukselski think tank Center for European Policy Studies i bardzo dziękuję także tej organizacji za całą współpracę dotychczasową i za to, że dwa polskie think tanki są także siecią częścią tej sieci. I chciałem przy okazji też zareklamować już dotychczasowy urobek naszych wspólnych działań w postaci dwóch obszernych publikacji, których pierwsza dotyczy stanu demokracji bezpośredniej w Europie, zawiera studia przypadku z całego szeregu krajów, plus takie analizy, które można nazwać horyzontalnymi, i stosunkowo niedawno opublikowanego drugiego tomu dotyczącego stanu demokracji reprezentatywnej w Europie. Te publikacje są zarówno w wersji internetowej, jak i drukowanej. Można je pobrać ze strony CEPS-u, można je pobrać także ze strony Instytutu Spraw Publicznych, do czego Państwa serdecznie zachęcam. Na temat samego meritum dzisiejszego spotkania, czyli wyborów, które się niedawno odbyły, nie będę w tej chwili mówił, będę miał przyjemność być członkiem panelu, gdzie będę mógł z kilkoma przemyśleniami na temat tych wyborów się z Państwem podzielić. Także jeszcze raz Państwu serdecznie dziękuję i chciałem przekazać teraz mikrofon współgospodarzowi spotkania, szefowi Biura Fundacji imienia Friedricha Eberta w Warszawie. Bardzo proszę.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Well, the Polish I know, so I will speak in English if you allow. So my name is Ernst Hillebrand. I'm the director of the Warsaw office of the German Free Liberty Foundation, a political party foundation linked to the German Social Democratic Party, and we are active in Poland just like other German political foundations in the 1980s. There's a lot of activities, and of course one of our most trusted and close and best partners in the Institute for Public Affairs. So we are very happy to be here and have this interesting debate with you about the results of the European elections. I think in most countries of Europe, the evening of last Sunday, before, there has been a sigh of relief. I think the results haven't been as bad as many people have been fearing in the uproar to the elections. But of course, the situation got much more complicated, and it has been before the European Parliament. We have a new constellation of majorities. It will be much more difficult to create majorities to resolve all the questions of people taking over responsibilities within the complicated framework of the European Union. So it will be really testing times and interesting times in the coming months to see what comes out of all this. In Germany, of course, the result has been also just like in the rest of Europe, but my colleague Christopher, he will speak about it in more detail, but we've seen on the one hand things that have become better than we had thought. Anti-European forces did not have really a good success, even relatively bad success. But on the other hand, of course, also the established mainstream parties took it better. They got really bad results. So we have seen yesterday morning the fallout of this president of the Social Democratic Party has been resigning, and of course also in the CDU there's a lot of pressure to change things and to rearrange things and to get a new start for the party and for the grand coalition government. And of course, I think the future of this government now is much more into question. But Christopher will have a better, deeper analysis of that. So thank you. Thanks to ESP again. Thanks to you for being here to share your experience, your point of view with us. And I hope we have a nice and interesting
Dziękuję serdecznie. Już przechodząc do debaty, nazywam się Agnieszka Łada, jestem dyrektorem Programu Europejskiego w Instytucie Spraw Publicznych i będę miała zaszczyt i przyjemność moderować dzisiejsze spotkanie. A do udziału w dyskusji zapraszam kolegów ze wspomnianej już sieci EPIN i kolegę z Fundacji Friedricha Eberta, czyli Krzysztofa Gaca z Fundacji Friedricha Eberta, który przyjechał do nas z Berlina. Jurkę Müller z Danii, który podzieli się duńską perspektywą na Europę, i Eleonorę Poli z Instytutu Spraw Międzynarodowych z Włoch. Zapraszam. Wspomniany Jacek Kucharczyk z ISP. Tak jak już wspomnieliśmy, do dyskusji mamy na pewno wiele zagadnień. Na sali jest też wielu kolegów z Austrii, z Czech, z Grecji, czyli z bardzo różnych zakątków Unii Europejskiej, więc też zachęcam później Państwa, kolegów z jednej strony do zabierania głosu, do dzielenia się Waszymi przemyśleniami, ale także publiczność polską do zadawania pytań także o inne kraje, bo po to się w tym gronie spotkaliśmy. Natomiast nasz temat, krajobraz po bitwie, zachęcił mnie do podejścia z kilku perspektyw do tego zagadnienia. I na samym początku chciałam, żebyśmy się przyjrzeli perspektywie narodowej. Jesteśmy, tak jak powiedziałam, z wielu krajów. Myślę, że w Polsce bardzo niewiele się mówi o tym, jak wybory europejskie wpłynęły, jakie były rezultaty wyborów w różnych krajach unijnych, ale także niewiele się mówi o tym, jaki to ma wpływ na politykę europejską, czy na sytuację w tych krajach. Więc na samym początku chciałam zobaczyć, jaki ten krajobraz po bitwie jest w państwach, z których przyjechali nasi eksperci, a później przejdziemy sobie do tego krajobrazu po bitwie w perspektywie europejskiej, czyli w tej perspektywie już jak będzie działał Parlament Europejski, jaki będzie podział stanowisk w Unii Europejskiej i co to znaczy w ogóle dla przyszłości Europy, jak długo ten krajobraz po bitwie będzie taki naprawdę po bitwie, a kiedy uda nam się już kształtować przyszłość, a nie tylko sprzątać po tej bitwie. Tak jak powiedziałam, najpierw zaczniemy od tej perspektywy narodowej. Eleonora, najpierw chciałabym Ciebie poprosić o krótkie spojrzenie na sytuację we Włoszech. Kto wygrał? Czy coś Cię zaskoczyło? Czy populiści odnieśli sukces, którego się spodziewano? Czy może raczej to jest porażka dla populistów? Jak ten typowo partyjny krajobraz wygląda po wynikach wyborów?
Italian, maybe for the wrong reason, but it's interesting. One of the questions I think that I should try to answer is that is Italy going to disappear from the European Union in the next years? Unfortunately, what it looks like is yes and no. But first of all, let's take a step back and consider why. If we did see this coming, yes, we did. We saw this coming. Unfortunately, however, provisions were not so bad in the sense that polls were reporting a victory of Salvini, the leader of the League of North, around 28-30%, a lot more, and partial defeat of the Five-Star Movement. Everyone in Italy was expecting such a result. There were many political and economic reasons behind this vote. What we did not expect was such a victory from Salvini. Why this happened? This is not started yesterday. This is not started 1 year ago. It started with the previous left-wing government and Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Like it happened in many European member countries, the government of the left wing was not able to provide economic reforms to dictate to overcome welfare issues in Italy, on the one hand. On the other, we had the migration problem and a mismanagement of what the EU could do and what Italy had to do, and too many promises to the people. This explains why, the Five-Star Movement won national election 1 year ago, but it doesn't explain why Salvini got so many votes. During the last year in Italy, Salvini was able to become the major leader within the Italian political system. The coalition government we have in Italy at the moment is formed by the Five-Star Movement, who got the majority of the votes at the national election. And then since the Five-Star Movement was not able to form a government by itself, it had to enter into a coalition government with the League, which was at the time the third party. This was a political choice because, of course, the Democratic Party, which was the second party, did not agree to enter in a coalition with the Five-Star Movement. By accepting Salvini as the second partner in the government, basically the Five-Star Movement allowed a stage to Salvini. It was so needed, it was so necessary for this government that he gained a lot of power, and this power, by becoming Minister of Interior and managing the migration issue, he was able basically to acquire a lot of legitimacy. What happened there is that the welfare reform proposed by the Five-Star Movement and implemented by the Five-Star Movement were not so much effective. On the other hand, Salvini was able to change the rhetoric, and instead of talking about welfare policies, he started to talk about security. So the people basically were not happy with their status with the welfare system, but they could obtain from Salvini security. By closing the port and maintaining that basically will not allow migrants to enter, it was kind of saying, okay, we are poor, but we are not going to have other people basically taking what we have already. And this is one of the main reasons why it was so successful. It was a strong man in a moment where the country felt very weak.
Thank you. And what does it mean? What does it say about your society? I mean, what can we expect, or what does it mean for your country European policy? What can we expect, coming from Italy? Not concerning the issues in the parliament or the setting in the parliament, but from the priorities.
Well, I think Italy is going to be marginalized at the European level. The campaign that was performed at national level was that, Salvini and the Forza movement were going to change Europe, they were going to change the Commission, they were going to change institutions. Unfortunately, what we're going to have is that Italy is going to be marginalized, and the League has not enough power within the European Parliament to dictate an agenda. Of course, it has a group which is, big enough to count something, but it's not going to completely challenge the European Parliament and so the European institutions. So although there is a lot of rhetoric and propaganda at national level that, Italy is now proposing a new model of the European Union, this is not reality, unfortunately, for the country. In the moment where Italy actually needs to be at the European table, to decide the future of the European institutions, to decide migration policies, economic policies, to discuss about this, I think we are going to miss Italy completely in the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Moving to the north, to Denmark, what was especially interesting for you in the results, or what was surprising? What about your populists? In Poland we know only that they are strong, or they have been strong. How is it in Denmark? What was really surprising for you?
I think really it was a landslide win for the pro-European parties in Denmark. In the 2014 European parliamentary elections, the Eurosceptic parties actually got about a third of the votes totally, and it came out as the biggest party, the Danish People's Party, which is a right-wing nationalistic party. Actually, recently joined the alliance of the Mr. Salvini, the Lega. So it's really a right-wing nationalistic party. They lost. They went from nearly 27% to get about 10%. So they really came from 4 mandates to 1 mandate. And so we got 80% of votes went to pro-European parties. The traditional parties in Denmark especially got a really good election. The governing party, the Liberal Party, came out as a winner in the sense of getting more votes than the other parties. The Social Democrats actually increased the number of votes. The Social Liberal, very pro-European party, came out together with the Socialist People's Party, which is a member of the Green Group in the European Parliament. So they really got a very big win. And the other interesting thing is a historical loss of a movement, a people's movement, founded in the wake of the Denmark entering the European community, a people's movement against the European Union. They didn't get any mandates for the European Parliament. They've been the strongest for some 2 decades ago, was the strongest movement on the European scene in Denmark. Now they're out. So we entered a new game in Denmark from traditionally talking about if you want to be a member of the European Union or want to opt out. Those who are wanting to find the exit door, the Brexit model, they're the big losers. So I think the biggest change in the political scene of European politics in Denmark is really that Brexit was a game changer. So people are really very much in favor of the European Union right now, and actually the outcome of the election is comparable to what citizens are telling about the membership being a good thing. Nearly 8 or 10 Danes are thinking that the membership of the European Union is a good thing for Denmark. So it's the idea of a small country in a big global turbulent landscape with not only Brexit, but Trump, Putin and others threatening our lifestyle, our values, our democracy, our economy, and Europe and European Union is really some kind of a safeguard that actually ensures stability and status quo. And then it goes into another thing. I think it's very important to think about the reasons. I think Danish politics is really transformed by global shocks, external shocks to the Danish model. We're a consensus society, so global shocks have actually changed the political landscape. The reasons behind the Danish People's Party having a good election in 2014 was that Denmark had just recently come out of the financial crisis. There was a big conversation about welfare tourism in Denmark. We didn't have that big conversation about welfare tourism in Denmark this time. It was about the basics, about the need to be a member of a bigger community. And I think another thing, actually, a global shock for Danes right now is a game changer, is climate change. It's not about 11th of September, the terrorism, the traumatic experiences from 11th of September. It's not about traumatic experiences from the global financial crisis. It's not about global the shocks that we got from the migration crisis in 2015 anymore. It's not about migrants. Of course it's there. It's down there in the feelings of the emotional landscape of citizens. But it's not really what is really frightening people. What is frightening people is Brexit, Trump, and those big autocratic destructors, or the world order we know, and climate change. So people are really voting in favor of parties supported to stronger measures on the climate agenda. So it changed the landscape. Just the day before the European Parlamentu election, we had Greta Thunberg, the famous teen from Sweden, there was a big manifestation in front of the parliament. And was also in the minds of people. For the first time, we moved from a second rank order election in Denmark on European politics to a first rank election. Because people felt, if somebody can do something about climate change, it's not about little Denmark, it's Europe. So Europe got a purpose for Danes in this election.
Thank you. Climate change important, being afraid of Brexit and Trump, it sounds familiar when I think about Germany, right? And then actually you have some other problems as well with populists who are still strong but not so strong as it was predicted, but you have some other problems on your political scene. I mean, your party or the party that your foundation is close to has right now no leader. She resigned only yesterday. The other big party, the CDU, has also big personal problems, also problems when it comes to the message. The Greens are very strong. So what would you say? What was surprising in the German result, and what has happened in this stable country?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you to all of you for coming out on such a beautiful Monday. Well, you were speaking of surprises, and I must say, I think the outcome of the European election in Germany didn't come as a surprise, because it was pretty much as the pollsters had predicted it. This was absolutely no wonder, and it didn't surprise anyone. It was like pretty much as I had predicted. But don't be scared, I'll be showing a few slides, but very, very short, I promise. It's not going to be a lengthy presentation here. This one? Thank you very much. Let me start with these slides. I apologize, they're only in German, but I will translate it to you. First of all, please have a look at this number, 61.4%. This is the turnout of the German population in this election, and you can see here in comparison to the election 5 years earlier, the turnout went up by 13%, which is really a lot. 13% more turnout. So it shows that people attach more importance to this election than they used 5 years ago. But if you compare it to the last general election in 2017, then I have to say the turnout used to be 75%, so still a lot higher than the 61% here. So it's still in Germany a second-order election. I have to say that. I'm a little sorry about this, but this is still the truth in Germany. And here you can see the results. Almost 29% for the Christian Democrats. They dropped by 6.5% in comparison to the last election. Even worse, it was for the Social Democrats, only almost 16%, a drop of almost 12%. But if you compare both numbers to the results of the last general election, both parties fell by about only 5%, not as much. So, yeah, but they both took a battering in roughly the same amount. The big winner, and I think the only big winner of this election, were the Greens with 20.5%, up by almost 10 percentage points. In the last general election in 2007, they gained only 8.5%, so they were much lower than these 20.5%. The leftist party, the Linke, also lost about 2 percentage points. The Liberals, the FDP, they earned 2%. That's not much difference. The other small winner of the European election in Germany was the AfD, the right-wing populists. They gained 11%. This looks like a success because they went up by 4%. This is not little. I think it's a fair amount. But if you compare it to the last election, the last general election, they stayed below their result, because in the last general election they gained 12.5%. So they were certainly expecting to gain more votes in this election. So for the AfD, even though they gained 4%, it was certainly a disappointment. And again, to which parties, this is the voter migration. This looks like a tangled mess. I apologize for this, but I will explain it. These are the voter migrations for the Christian Democrats and these for the Social Democrats. And they both lost most voters to the non-voters. The bar here at the bottom, 2 million votes they lost to the yeah, thank you very much. Almost 2 million votes both parties lost to the non-voters, and 1 million votes they lost to the Green Party from both camps, both from the Christian Democrat conservative side and from the more left-wing center-left side. The Greens, by the way, they lost from, they gained votes from all other parties, even from the right-wing populists, which comes as a surprise. And as the only party, they also made people vote who usually, who in the last general election didn't vote. So this is the comparison, by the way, I should explain this. This is the comparison with the last general election, not with the last European election. And the AfD, well, yeah, they also lost almost 2 million voters to the non-voters, which shows that the European election did not mobilize protest voters in Germany, not at all, because the Germans are very pro-European, as the Danish, as you said. This is a voter profile of the Green voters, the big winners of the party. And we can see here, these are the age groups. The younger people, under 25, they are overrepresented among the voters. It's more women than men that vote for the Greens. And it's more the employees or German state officials or self-employed people who vote for the Greens, but they are underrepresented among unemployed and among the working class. These two groups do not vote for the Greens. And finally, what is also very interesting is, this is the question, why did you vote for the Greens? Was it out of conviction, or was it out of disappointment? And we see here clearly it is out of conviction, not out of disappointment. And now the stark comparison to the right-wing populists. You see here they are more, they're stronger among people in middle ages, stronger among males, and they're also very strong among workers and among the unemployed, which is a stark comparison in comparison to the Greens. And also here, finally, people vote for the AfD out of disappointment and not out of conviction. So, we're done.
What does it mean? What does it mean for your society or for the future of the party system in your country?
I think, first of all, it means that, as is the case in Denmark, Germans are very pro-European. 80 to 90% of the Germans say they are very, that the advantages of the European outweigh the disadvantages. So, if you want to mobilize protest voters, it doesn't make sense to do this on the issue of the European integration, because people, even right-wing people, where they are not so much opposed against Europe. And the AfD, they didn't claim to pull Germany out of the EU or to abolish the EU altogether. They said, well, let's tentatively reform Europe so that nation states play a larger role or something. So even right-wing populists were relatively pro-European in Germany. This, first of all, but it also shows that people in Germany are very much tired of the Great Coalition that used to govern in Germany for the past, well, with a short interruption, like 16 years almost, with only one interruption. And people just have the feeling that the parties in the Great Coalition, they are blocking themselves. The SPD wants entirely different things than the Christian Democrats. Party programs are not compatible. It was more like a makeshift solution that came up because after the last election there used to be, there were several attempts to build another coalition out of Christian Democrats, liberals and Greens. But eventually the liberals pulled out of these negotiations, so the negotiations failed, and the Great Coalition was a measure of last resort. No one actually wanted it. It's a very unloved coalition, and yeah, it just continually fails to recognize what people actually demand, what they actually want from politics. Because what you mentioned is also true for Germany. Greta Thunberg was several times in Germany. In the past 6 weeks before the election, there were several demonstrations and strikes of pupils and young students demanding more action for climate protection. And this topic, it was not so important before that. Only 6 months before the election, these demonstrations started, and only 6 weeks before the election, this topic became important. 6 weeks earlier, it was migration that was the most important topic, but then this demonstration started. And in the end, it was climate change and climate protection that became the most important topic. And this is also the explanation why the Greens won so big.
Thank you. I think we will come back to Germany and the political state of play in Germany during the discussion. Well, the Greens are not so strong in Poland, I would say. The climate change was not really a topic during the last few weeks. The populists are quite strong. So, Jacek, what was surprising for you, or when you compare the Polish situation, because I think we know the results here in this room, but maybe for our foreign guests, you can tell us also something about it. What was surprising in comparison to the countries mentioned?
Yes. I don't have such nice slides to show the vote division, but I think that at least most of our Polish guests know very well how the votes turn out, so I will just start with the surprise. And for me it was electoral turnout, which was perhaps the biggest surprise, not just because it was so much higher than in the previous European elections, because almost everybody expected the turnout to be higher and significantly higher. But I think that what was surprising was actually who was mobilized to vote, and that came unexpected. That is, the opposition in the run-up to the elections, I think, made a clear assumption that in these elections they have an inherent advantage, because people who care about European integration are usually the better educated urban citizens who are therefore likely to turn out in much stronger numbers than people in rural areas, small towns, which are usually supporting the current government. So what came as a surprise, I think, to everybody, maybe even including some representatives of the ruling party, is how well mobilized were the people in those small towns, villages, and so on and so forth. And with this surprise comes the second surprise, namely the size of the victory of the ruling party, because opinion polls were very, very different in the run-up. So we don't have any actually opinion poll which predicted exactly the results. But in most cases, what is striking is that I don't think a single opinion poll predicted the size of support for the government in those elections. So even the most optimistic from the government point of view, opinion polls gave it a bit less than what they actually gained, and the 7 percentage point advantage of the government of the opposition, I think, also took everyone by surprise. And so why was government so successful when everybody expected something close to a tie, maybe victory of the government, but more of a tie? I think that was basically related to the government's or the ruling party's ability to neutralize all the narratives which put it in weaker position vis-à-vis European elections. So I would say that in spite of the fact that the turnout was so, well, quite decent for Poland, almost 45%, about 45%, I would still say that these were basically second-order elections in our country. That is, they were not really about European Union or even in the place of Poland in Europe. They were largely kind of preliminaries for the national parliamentary elections, which will take place this autumn. And I think that one reason why the opposition, which by opposition I mainly mean the European coalition, so this broad coalition of different parties from moderate right to left, why the expectations were not fulfilled is how skillfully the ruling party neutralized all these accusations that what they've been doing, their policy in Europe leads to Poland's marginalization, possibly even Polexit. I mean, this discourse of the opposition basically fell on flat ears, and it was, at least to my knowledge, largely even abandoned by the opposition during the last 2 weeks in the run-up to the election. The ruling party actually apparently did its homework by reading opinion polls, and since Polish public opinion is very strongly pro-European, in fact, at least one opinion poll put the support for EU membership at 91%. The ruling party basically avoided criticizing EU or criticizing Europe throughout the campaign. What is more, they put a very catchy electoral slogan, Poland, heart of Europe, which many on the opposition side made fun of, but in fact I think it was extremely effective in neutralizing all this talk about Polexit, about Poland being a second-rate member, and so on and so forth. So this was one element of the victory, but the ruling party also had two very strong assets. Namely, they not only neutralized this narrative about Europe, but they managed to replace it very successfully with another narrative, which is that of defending the church, the family, and national tradition against the opposition, against some minorities, most notably LGBT, who, according to this narrative, are threatening the sort of traditional family. And the government was able to back up this claim to defend and support the family with very generous cash handouts that they can afford because of the good state of the economy, at least in the short term they can afford. And once again, if you look at the levels of support, for example, among old age pensioners, I mean, it's very difficult not to believe that this has nothing to do with the fact that they were, every single old age pensioner was paid some significant amount of money just a couple of weeks before the elections, and more money was promised after the election and before the next election. So I think this combination of not hesitating to use state resources and also to use the state resources for government propaganda, such as public television, but also some funds for electoral posters, billboards. I mean, there was a very clear difference between the government and the opposition. And maybe last sentence, the last surprise was a relatively poor performance of the new party called Spring, which offered a very clear agenda in contrast to the main opposition coalition, which was very broad and didn't have any very strong common narratives. The Spring Party had very progressive pro-European agenda on climate, on civil rights, on human rights, on minorities' rights, and yet they basically fell victims to this very strong asymmetrical polarization of the political scene, and they only managed to gain 6% and three seats, which is maybe for a newcomer it's a success, but at the same time the expectations were much higher.
Thank you. I would move more towards the European policy. I mean, what can we expect from the future European Parliament? There is a question what kind of issues we can expect having such parties, but there is also a question what kind of setting we can expect. We know now in Brussels the talks are running, what kind of political groups will be established, who with whom. I think we have here, especially from Italy and Denmark, representatives of the countries, of the political countries with political parties that have to decide what kind of political groups will be established. Salvini, Kaczynski are also a question mark which group they will create, who will join the groups. So maybe starting with this question, future setting of the European Parliament, where the parties from your countries will go. Are there any question marks, or is everything already agreed, or is it, you know, everything is a question mark that we will live with in the next weeks, starting with Italy?
Thank you. I think the most interesting question mark is concerning the five-star movement. At the moment, it's still not. Oh, sorry, it's yeah, the problem with microphones apparently. So the big problem is concerning the five-star movement. We still don't know which political group the five-star movement will enter. According to some analysts, apparently there was chances for the five-star movement to enter in the conservative group, but this is not going to happen. The five-star movement was members of the five-star movement have always been keen to enter into the Liberal Party or the Green Party or the Green Group, but none of those groups is going to accept the five-star movement. They already tried, I think it was 2 years ago already, with the Liberals, and they failed. With the Greens, the problem is that the five-star movement is too big as a party. They have around 86 seats, I think, something. So they want. So they're going to have too much power if they enter in a relatively smaller group such as the Greens. Although many issues of the environment have been basically supported by the five-star movement, and this could be a way to normalize such a party. I think leaving the five-star movement with a populist is going to be very bad for Italy, but also for the European Union. because you leave aside a party that can become a sort of not traditional, but it can be normalized in a corner with the most radical party. The other is the Salvini, which has claimed is going to form a group, the European Alliance of People and Nations. I still don't know whether it's going to be able to actually form this group. At the moment, the big alliance are the Dutch, but also not the Dutch, Danish, sorry, the Alternative for Germany and Le Pen. But for instance, Vox from Spain said that he's not going to enter in the coalition. Farage is not going to enter in the coalition, and also Orban is not going to enter in this group. So it's still to see whether it will be able to form. I think he will in the end with smaller parties from other countries, but still he lost basically the big players. Apart from the Alternative for Germany and Le Pen, he lost the other big players, the European Eurosceptic panorama, I would say. Thank you.
I will just, I think I'll go to the helicopter just for a moment, I think, because there was a lot of talk about the Salvini Alliance and other Eurosceptic parties. Maybe they could get a kind of position in the European Parliament, able to obstruct policies, and I think the big picture is that more than 70% of the mandates in the European Parliament is, depending on if you count Orban in or out, but anyway, a huge majority of those are pro-European parties. So I think really that's a big thing. And then there's the dramatic fall of the traditional parties, especially the Social Democrats. But you can see the big countries, the Social Democrats really have been the losers in some way. The political earthquake related to how we tackled the global economic financial crisis. They have never overcome that, and the voters was captured by the right-wing populists coming in with cheap offers. So they couldn't really reformulate themselves. And what we see in Germany right now, the Green parties, is really the stronger force. Now the recent polls, they come up on top even. Got a very good election in Bayern as well. So I think it's very interesting to see the transformation. And what we see in the Danish political parties, that actually you have 6 of the 14 mandates coming from the ALDE group, the Liberal Party, in the European Parliament now. And where the Danish People's Party, they made a huge mistake aligning themselves with Salvini. And he's Putin lovers, I must say. Danes don't like foreign interference in our election. So to be aligned with him and Wilders and Le Pen and FPÖ in Austria is really a loser in Denmark. So in the last election they were aligned with the ECR, so with the so-called moderate conservatives, critical Eurosceptics. So they lost that gamble, coming from 4 mandates to 1 mandate. But the interesting thing is now, from the scene from Danish perspective, is that the opening of the political landscape in the European Parliament from a more pluralistic political negotiation game, where after decades of a duopoly situation with the Conservatives and Social Democrats, now we have an open negotiation process. And especially with 6 members of the ALDE group, we are also having some influence in the ALDE group, so we can also influence this. I think it helps Denmark. In fact, you can see the Schulz effects in the last election in Germany. The German Social Democrats got a good election compared to national elections, I think. And we have a Margrethe Vestager effect as well. So that Margrethe Vestager might be in the run for being a president of the Commission, helped also. But we got a turnout of 66% in Denmark, and that is an overall in Europe. The higher turnout, high legitimacy of the European Parliament right now, more than 50% actually in the turnout. So I think it's a change. And I think it's an interesting normalization of politics at the European level. We are opening a new phase in European, not democracy, but at least in the way we're doing politics in Europe, where there is a more open landscape. And the socialists, or S&D group, will ask the Greens to be a part of the bigger coalition, because they will be squeezed by the ALDE and the Conservatives on economic policies. And then we see the bigger picture. Then the southern European landscape is we have social economic concerns dominating. We have in Northern Western Europe, climate concerns dominating. Germany actually came in the last Eurobarometer in March, was done in March and published in April. It came out as the biggest concern in Germany as well. So it's a very interesting change of the game. The green politics were actually very dominating. I think Angela Merkel has also changed in the Harvard speech. So the German had actually been an obstacle towards more progressive green policies. So now we'll see a push there. Migration concerns is falling in all over Europe, except Central and Eastern Europe. And in Germany was the biggest one, as you said. Now it's the second. In Denmark it's also falling. The fear of terrorism is also falling. So the biggest global crisis is there. But there is a decrease, and green politics or climate concerns are up on the priority list among citizens, and the concern of stability, security, protection in the global world, etc. So I think this could change the dynamics in the European Parliament as well, and maybe give Europe as a kind of raison d'etre again, where it might have been lost due to many poly-crises or interlinked crises, whatever you call them.
Thank you. I think in Germany it's quite obvious. CDU, SPD, liberals, we know to which political family they belong. What about AfD? So what are the discussions? Which political group they will join, with whom they can really do something, and because with Kaczynski probably not. So who is the one?
Well, in the last parliament, the AfD they splintered, and some joined, I think, the ECR, and some joined the FPÖ and some other parties. But I think this will be over in this legislature, because in this legislature they will try to join the Lega, and together with the FPÖ and with the property and so on. But let's see how long this will last, actually, because in economic terms, I think Salvini has an entirely different stance than the economically really extremely conservative AfD in Germany. They want no transfer union, they want a very austere state, and they're claiming that Germany is paying for everything. There will be no transfer union, no matter what. So let's see how long this will last.
And no transfer of migrants.
Yeah, this of course not. This is another very important topic. But then again, what is also interesting is what is going to happen with the Greens, because the Greens came out as the big winners in the election, but this might end up, with a little bad luck, as a big disappointment, because on the European level, the Greens are not strong. They are very strong on the German level, but they're not so strong as a parliamentary group in the European Parliament. And if the SD, the European People's Party, and the ALDE agree on something like an informal coalition, the Greens might end up marginalized, because they would not be needed in arithmetic terms to get a majority. Maybe the SD makes steps towards the Greens and invites them in to form some sort of bigger coalition or something to get higher leverage inside this coalition. This might help to give the Greens more leverage, but if not, they might be ending up isolated in the parliament. This will certainly not help their agenda to make climate protection a higher priority in European politics, because they will end up without having any say in it.
We can look at on the impact of groups, looking to the numbers, but I think it's the indirect consequences of those movements coming to the fore and be addressing concerns among citizens, because politicians are looking towards those concerns. And I think that the impact is a secondary effect. So that indirect effect, ability to influence mainstream parties, was really the biggest impact of the right-wing nationalists. Anti-immigration policies was adopted by mainstream parties, at least in our country and several other countries, to a certain extent. So the ability to have an impact on the other parties will be a very important thing to look for when you analyze the impact of the Greens.
And it's like It's very similar when we think about Poland, with the peace being in a political group that is not really important in the European Parliament. It's not the first time. So they are very strong here. They won't be so strong, or not at all strong, in Brussels. What about the setting? What are the partners for the peace?
Yes, I would say that there is a very interesting paradox about the outcome of Polish European elections, namely that the party which celebrates its huge victory, biggest ever probably in the history of this party in terms of share of votes they took, will at the same time clearly throw punches below its level, below its weight in the European Parliament, I mean below its national weight, because exactly of this fact that they don't have that many options. I mean, the working assumption is that they will be in the conservative group, because moving too much to the far may be very disadvantageous from the point of view of Polish electorate, which, as I said, so far is buying the idea that this party is putting Poland in the heart of Europe. In other words, that it is not a Eurosceptic anti-EU party. This is the message that they have for the Euro-enthusiastic voters in Poland. But at the same time, there is only so far, it means that there is only so far right that they can go. And also some partners like Mr. Salvini or even Mr. Orban may prove toxic in terms of, for example, EU relations with Russia. I mean, there is a very clear discrepancy between what Orban and Salvini say on Putin sanctions and so on, and what Polish ruling party has to say and its policy on Russia. So there are clearly limitations. On the other hand, the perceived losers, that is the European coalition, will supply quite a strong team for the European People's Party group, and I think that they will continue to have a fairly strong position within the EU. Plus, there will be some newcomers for other groups. And last thing I wanted to say is that the fact that EPD will not have such a strong position as it had in the previous parliament, and that there will be a need for a broader majority coalition within the parliament and then in the institutions, can paradoxically make life more difficult for the current Polish government, because I think that the coalition partners are much more likely to press for a very critical Brussels approach to backsliding on the rule of law, on European values. So the issues that are clearly very important for the domestic political agenda of our ruling party. So I think that's the landscape after the election from the point of view of Polish position within the EU is therefore quite paradoxical. I mean, the losers are not such big losers, and the winners are not such big winners in this respect.
Still, the show is going on, so we have now, we are after the battle, but we still have a battle around the posts about the positions. Tusk is leaving, Juncker is leaving, so what is the discussion in your countries about that? I mean, are there clear candidates for the positions? Is the idea of Spitzenkandidaten somehow the solution, or it's rather something that the voters don't know about and that politicians rather don't care about, or rather even as Macron in France don't like it at all? How it is in Denmark, you have your own candidate for that important position.
Yeah, right now we love the Spitzenkandidat process. No, I think people are quite divided on this topic. I think it's not really the problem with the Spitzenkandidat process is that we don't have transnational elections in Europe. So, and there's no clear political program, and if the Conservative Party can present a regional politician, a European parliamentarian like Manfred Weber, that is really not a person of a well-figured level, you would think of it as a complicated process. He will not be president of the commission. I'm quite certain of that. Margrethe Vestager is a very capable person, but she's dividing the political landscape in Denmark. So, because she was so tough on economic policies, she's a very disciplined person.
Can you just tell us a little bit more who was she in the recent years in Denmark, so that we understand?
She was vice prime minister in Denmark in a former social democratic, social liberal government, and she disciplined the social democrats to the eurozone discipline. We're not a euro member, but it was euro, the fiscal pact, etc. Denmark entered in the fiscal pact, and we are one of the most disciplined countries in that. And this is the stand for Margrethe Vestager. What made her popular is, of course, her ability to discipline the Americans, the foreigners. So we have a substitute for the foreigner culprits, the immigrants. Now it's American capital, so to speak, digital capital. The ability to discipline the foreigners in that sense, to create to show the power of the European Union for the Danes, have actually been a very strong lesson. And I think she will be a good team player. She understands the game of the Commission and also getting national support for some of those big decisions she's made in the past. So she's liked by many groups. That's her strength. And she's a woman. There are many women that probably also could apply for that position, but she's a very strong position that game. Eventually, I don't think she will get the post for many reasons.
Another country with Spitzenkandidaten is Germany. Manfred Weber. What about his chances? Still, Angela Merkel has just said, yes, that's our candidate. What about the other voices from Germany?
I think he has the strong backing of the Christian Democrats, but he doesn't have a strong backing within the population. Manfred Weber is not popular in Germany, and he is not broadly known. I think 40%, and this is probably a lie, in truth it's a much higher number, don't even know him. They saw him on the billboards, but don't really know who he is and what he's saying and so on. They don't know much about him, and they don't like him. There was a poll very shortly before the election that said Franz Timmermans is actually more popular in Germany than Manfred Weber. So, given that, I'm not quite sure if he will make it. I agree with you on this, because, how can I say, there's so much opposition against him in the European Council. Macron is in strong opposition against him, and if he is playing hardball, saying, no, I'm not going to support him, then no way that he can become the president of the Commission. Maybe Margrethe Vestager, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Thank you, I learned it from you just a minute ago. Thank you very much for this. She might be come out as a sort of compromise candidate, because Franz Timmermans cannot be the president of the Commission either, because the Social Democrats are just too weak in the Parliament. So it must be some sort of great coalition among LD, EPP, and the Social Democrats. And maybe, since she was also a sort of Spitzenkandidat, she might be a compromise candidate, but maybe it's going to be some other kind of dark horse, maybe Michel Barnier. But then again, I don't see this happening as well, because he's the candidate Macron wants, and if he is strong enough to push this through, I'm not sure about it. So maybe it will be someone entirely different.
So, if not Weber for the President of the European Commission, which position is important for the Germans? I mean, is it the post of the chef of the European Central Bank, or you would rather go for an important position in the Commission?
Yes, exactly. You're speaking of Jens Weidmann. And I think for the German conservatives, Jens Weidmann is perfectly acceptable as one of the top posts. If Manfred Weber doesn't get the job, well, no matter, as long as Jens Weidmann gets this job. Because, Germany has deep-rooted history of very hawkish monetary policy, and Jens Weidmann is somehow embodying this, even though no one knows if he would be able to push through such a course once he gets elected as president. But this is something people hope for, should he get elected. Not the Italians, of course, and therefore, I don't think that he has good chances. I would even think Manfred Weber has better chances to become president of the Commission than Jens Weidmann becoming president of the ECB, because he always held minority positions in the ECB, and why would they vote then for him? I don't see this happening. So I think there's quite a high likelihood that Germany will end up without any of these top posts, because no one in Germany wants to see conservative German politicians in one of these top posts. And the Germans cannot push them through alone on their own. It's not possible. So they need the help of other governments, and I don't see this happening in sufficient numbers.
So,
yeah, of course, her party wants her, and they strongly demand her to bring home a trophy. And if she fails to deliver, that might speed up her demise. Not quite sure about.
so who will be supported by the Italians or by the Italian government?
Well, of course, the Italians, the government, yes, no, Salvini has, is hoping to get like a Commissioner of Economic and Financial Affairs. That is not going to happen. I don't think this will never happen. There are no other candidates at the moment. I don't think Italy has any power to kind of push for an important position in the Commission, not to talk about other institutions. What I found very interesting is that you can see with the end of big partisanism within the European Parliament, you have a sort of nationalization of European politics. You have the same dynamics that you have at home. You can find it now at the European level. I think this is, apart from the Spitzen candidate, which is not working in Italy, but this making the European parliamentary, the election, this politicization of institutions and everything is making the European Union more human, and I think it's also related to the fact that more people wanted to vote. They feel like these institutions are closer to their understanding now, and I think this is a positive outcome. Let's see what's going to happen.
Thank you. Spitzenkandidat is also not the idea that we support in Poland. I mean, as a society that we know as the society. So which positions, which posts would be interesting for the Polish government, or do we have any chances to get something really good?
I think this is a very good question. I think there is a surprisingly little political debate in Poland on those top jobs, and this is for obvious reasons, because the current government has very little hopes to put forward a viable candidate. Last time we tried, or they tried, with Mr. Saryusz-Wolski for the position of President of the European Council. It wasn't exactly a very big success. So now the only name I've heard around was that of former Prime Minister Beata Szydło, who had a very good result in the European elections, but I think this is rather posturing for the domestic audience than a serious candidate. The second thing striking is that obviously the opposition might have more to say. The obvious candidate would be Mr. Weber, but I think they also, for domestic reasons, are not very much willing to come out in support of a German candidate too much, because this will be immediately used for political attack. So I have a feeling that the Polish political classes in its entirety has very low ambitions in shaping these outcomes, these discussions. Especially that we had Mr. Tusk, we had Mr. Buzek in top positions already, so the chances of support of having another poll are I would assume quite low. The solution, or faith-saving solution for the Polish ruling party of the government would be to have someone from the region, but once again, maybe my colleagues have heard some discussion about it. I haven't heard any actual names put on the line on this, so I don't think that Poland will make a very big contribution to this debate.
I think there's a very important thing to to really to analyze the new relationship between Spain and France, because Pedro Sanchez got a very good election. He's strengthened in the power game in European politics. He's the only social democrat really coming out as a winner, as also the Portuguese socialists are coming out, but Spain will be the Franz Timmermans. But it was a very small win in comparison to that he was actually Spitzenkandidat. But he's a very strong politician, very recognized, and people had a high, he had a high impact in the debates, really, also in Denmark. So he's a very capable president of the Commission, but he wants to be foreign minister because he's very skilled in that field, and he recognizes the political landscape. So I think the important, crucial thing for the Spanish socialists will be to ensure that we'll not end up in a position with even stronger austerity policies. So I think it rules out Weidmann, and he's divisive, even sometimes been flirting whether we need to break up the Eurozone, so to speak, the good guys and the bad guys. And I think that will not go. So I think it's quite probably that if Barnier, which I see as a very good compromise candidate, very capable, he united 27 countries as a president of the Commission, if he's not accepted by Germany or others, I think France will go for the ECB. Either Villeroy, which is the first, he's the president of France's National Bank, or it could be someone else. It could also be Benoît Cœuré right now in the ECB, but I think France will go for ECB because then they're more in control. And it's important for the strategic power play of France and Macron of a strengthening the Eurozone had not really been recognized by Angela Merkel and the hardliners in Germany, but he now has a bridge to Spain. And then I think the question of the president of the council, I think Grybauskaitė in Lithuania, outgoing president, is a very strong person in this game, and she's very capable, an EPP. So you help them to get some win. And then the question of the president of the commission, I'm not really sure who can get it. It could be Vestager coming in as a last compromise candidate for several parties. I think the Greens could accept her, the Social Democrats could accept her, and of course the ALDE group. But I think Mark Rutte and others have other games, So I'm not sure that she will get it, in fact, in the end. And Denmark is an up-down country. We should not forget that.
With that, I would like to open the floor for the audience. If my colleagues coming from different countries have the solution or have the answer, you are now invited to share your ideas or your predictions with us. Tym samym chciałam otworzyć już naszą debatę dla Państwa. Jeżeli są pytania, komentarze z sali, to serdecznie zapraszam. Jak najbardziej można po polsku. Proszę się tylko przedstawiać, żebyśmy wiedzieli, skąd Państwa są. Są mikrofony, będą, w związku z tym proszę się zgłaszać. Najpierw Szczepanik.
Najpierw Szczepanik, Polish Institute of International Affairs. Well, we talked quite a lot about politics, and I would like to ask you about policies. I think we probably all agree that policy related to climate change will be more prominent in the next term. But can you see a shift in the balance of power, in the political balance of power when it comes to other policy areas? Do you think this parliament may take different positions than the previous one? And I would also like to ask you about the Commission. Do you think it might be a different Commission, more political, less political? What do you think will be the impact of commissioners from Italy or other less Euro-enthusiastic countries?
Jeszcze pytania, zapraszam. So, one of you is going to answer.
Well, thank you for your question. I think that although anti-European forces did not win, we still have a higher number of parties that are anti-European. So of course the new European Parliament will have to take into consideration that there is a growing number of European citizens that don't like the European Union as it is, and something might have to be changed. So I think when it comes to, well, first of all, for instance, green policies are going to take, I think, a bigger role in the new European Parliament. This is for sure. And we might see maybe less austerity policies because of what happened, with the result of the election. This doesn't mean that austerity policies are going to disappear, but maybe a slighter, less stricter approach, at least, my vision. And I think there will be a bigger politicization of the other institutions. As I already said, my understanding is that European institutions, the dynamic within the European institution has been nationalized in the sense that there is more politics going around in the European Union. We used to see the European Union as a sort of bubble, institutional bubble, bureaucratic bubble. I don't think it is anymore like this. I think there is a lot of political debate inside, and especially with this parliament, with so many political forces, I think, of course, the future institutions will be influenced by that.
I think they will have a reinforcement of sort of the tendencies that we've seen in the recent period. I think the European Parliament, with 4 parties, a more plural debate, can even, of course there will be complications in the process of negotiations, of agreements on that, but I think the professionalization of the backbone of the European Parliament, the way the negotiation machine is really quite developed right now. I think it's capable of influencing core political discussions inside the trilogues. I think they will have an influence. I think the Commission will still be a very political Commission, driving through some very important discussions, because there is one of the big issues is the competition, global competition, not only from China but other forces, and the disruption of Donald Trump. I think there is a really strong recognition inside the Brussels environment that there is a need for Europe in that context. The risks, I want to address some of the risks. The risks is that we'll end up in a new global financial crisis. 2020, there's a high risk. In 2013, we came out of the financial crisis in Europe with growth figures coming back, and now we have the 7 years. I'm not talking about the Bible here, but there is quite a frequency there, and you should be very careful. And the problem is that the debt levels in many different countries is quite high due to what we did, bailing out big banks. And the big banks haven't learned the lesson. So we still have a lot of irresponsibility built into the system. And that can create us huge tensions in the future. So the big need for a debate about the future of Europe in the world, and a stronger Europe in the world, which is, I think, shared among all the big 4 pro-European parties in the parliament, and also many countries. We should remember that there's very few countries that are governed by Eurosceptical parties, and they only have 30%, more or less, the big broad fragmentation amongst Eurosceptic parties. But there's no fragmentation in the European Parliament. There's cohesion among those 4 parties, big pro-Europe parties. We need a stronger Europe. But can they do this in a period if we are having a backlash with global financial crisis? Donald Trump is disrupting everything, protectionism, etc., etc. There are many reasons. A bubble and financial bubble. So there's a risk that we'll get into a new crisis. And how will Europe deal with that? How will Germany deal with that? Where I'm most scared about the German car industry is they're able to do the transformation that citizens are demanding to electric cars. Are they behind the curve, or they get ahead of the curve once more? Because if we get problems in Germany at the core, the backbone of European economy, the German industry, we're in for a rough ride.
Maybe we want tackle the issue of the German car industry. It's very interesting, but maybe we'll skip this topic, but what about the German perspective on the question?
Yeah, I think this is right. I agree with everything you said, and I don't think that I can add too much to it, but one issue which is still very important, even though it was not so important in the German election, maybe it wasn't so important in the Danish election either, but this is still migration, and this is still simmering. It's not the most salient issue now at the moment, but it can come back. Let's wait until there's summer and the Mediterranean Sea gets a little calmer and there are more boats coming, for example. This issue can come back to the fore, and then it needs to be tackled in some sort of way. I don't know the solution here, and no one does. I think in the end there will be somewhat great compromise among all the parties in the European Parliament, whatever this will look like. But this is also one very big issue that needs to be tackled. And I also see one positive aspect in these external threats you mentioned. I think these threats are very real, but they make a strong case for Europeans that they need to stay together, because otherwise they will be marginalized on the world stage. So it makes sure that no country in Europe on its own can do something about Trump or China or whatsoever. We cannot decide on the rules unless we decide on them in concert. So this is one positive aspect I can see.
I think talking about policies and policy debate, one issue which is important here domestically, it even happened to be mentioned during the electoral campaign, is the issue of the future budget, the final budget for the next financial perspective, and also the related issue of these rules of law provisions that will prohibit sending monies to countries which backslide on the rule of law. And obviously this is something that the Polish government would be keen to have as big a budget without the provisions. I think they will be only partly successful in getting that, especially on the size of the budget. The Polish opposition also has a very mixed view or approach to these issues. The civic platform MEPs were not very keen on having these rule of law provisions. Again, for domestic reasons, they were afraid to be accused of sort of hurting the national interest. So I think that from the Polish perspective, it will be more of the same as far as our attitude, but this issue will be very, very much watched, and I think may come up in the parliamentary elections. So paradoxically, it may happen that our parliamentary national elections will be more European than European elections because of this and some other issues like climate change.
We will see. Tutaj tak. Później Agata Gostyńska i będziemy się cofać.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to give one quick comment and ask 3 questions. My comment is, I'll be very quick. My comment is that I wouldn't talk so much about second-order elections anymore, because we have seen quite an increase also on an aggregate EU level of the turnout. It's a little bit of turnaround if you think about the last 20 years, and it's the first time in the last 20 years that voters are actually a majority compared to non-voters. So the trend is right, in particular in Poland, where you double the turnout. And let's stop talking about second-order elections. I think that would be a good start. My questions. Italy. Salvini would like to sit on the table and influence European developments, European politics, but in fact, he probably can't. And I wonder if his overshooting in terms of the creation of expectations, will it do any harm to him at home, or is it just about the next headline, and on a domestic level, no one really cares how much influence he has? The question on Denmark, you've mentioned that mainly because of Brexit, there are many people opting in now regarding their EU attitude. Now, what about the opt-outs? Will you actually, is this the time where you can actually scrap some, or at least consider rethinking some of the opt-outs? And what if Margaret Vestager becomes president of the Commission? Is that a price that Danes are willing to pay? That would be my question. And then to our Polish colleagues, my question is, so what were the main motivations to vote for the governing, ruling party? And how important, you just mentioned, how important is actually climate change, and how important was the whole freedom of justice infringement procedure in the whole public discussion? The doubling of the turnout has to come from somewhere. Thank you.
Colleague, Agata?
Thank you very much. Agata Kostinska, Center for European Reform in Brussels. I also have comments / question. A little bit follow up to what you said about the turnout. I mean, we focus on the turnout. Yes, it did increase, but does it really translate into greater public engagement in European affairs? Because I'm not convinced. So I would be very much interested in your views. Then perhaps comment to question about policies. It seems to me that anyone who wants to have a backing of progressives plus Greens needs to basically focus on more radical issues, and climate change is just one of them. So to me, another policy field would be definitely addressing social inequalities, which the polling shows the citizens are concerned about, and also the democracy and the rule of law, because both progressives and Greens are pretty vocal about it. So my question would be also to all of you, how prominent the rule of law debate will be in the next 5 years.
Here?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone.
No, the colleague.
Hello.
Sorry. No, you can have the microphone.
Okay. Can I go?
So talk at the same time.
That's difficult. Well, apologies in advance because I arrived late because of a delay. It's not so easy to come from Spain actually to go here to Warsaw. So apologies in advance because maybe I should raise a couple of things that may have been said. That's the reason why. So my name is Salvador Llaudes. I'm an analyst at the Elcano Royal Institute in Madrid. And I would like to ask you about a couple of things. One of them would be Brexit. So we know that, of course, EU27 plus the European Parliament and the Commission have been together, hand in hand, following the process and doing a really great job when it comes to facing the UK in this whole period of time. So what's going to happen next? We are going to be seeing a new leader with a different agenda from the UK. What's going to happen from the leadership of the European Union, including, I'm talking about all the institutions. So maybe you should say something about this. And then my second question would be on the Spitzenkandidaten process. We all know that the European Parliament has been saying for a while that it only is going to accept Spitzenkandidaten, and we don't know really if that includes Vestager or not. But do you really think that there is a strong chance, or not, of having an institutional crisis among the European Council and the European Commission because of the Spitzenkandidaten process? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra Karabon. I would like to ask about the campaigns. What was the most successful way of getting the voters vote for a particular party in each of the countries? Because as for Poland, I would say from my perspective, the success of peace was that they were in place. They were in every single little village. So I'm curious, was it the internet in your countries? Was it the direct meetings with the voters or something else?
And the last, Filip Skaminski. Yes, and now I will come back.
Rafał Korzyniecki, Klub Integracji Europejskiej. Miała być ofensywa sił eurosceptycznych, była i spaliła na panetę. Przynajmniej z punktu widzenia ich oczekiwań i obaw ich przeciwników. Ale czy nie istotniejsze od tego będzie to, że te ugrupowania, o czym już była tutaj mowa, nie są w stanie w Parlamencie Europejskim stworzyć żadnego liczącego się ugrupowania i zostaną z natury rzeczy zmarginalizowane. I czy, dalej idąc tym tropem, jedną z rzeczy, ważniejszych zjawisk, które będziemy obserwować, nie będzie zniechęcenie, krytyka tego parlamentu ze strony tych sił, które nie będą w stanie niczego zrobić w tym parlamencie. Wszystko zostanie zrobione bez nich. Oni będą tylko gadać. I do biurokratów europejskich, które są stałym wrogiem sztandarowym, nie dołączy Europarlament. Ich głównym hasłem nie będzie nie tylko nie wzmocnienie, ale ograniczenie wpływu Parlamentu Europejskiego jako czegoś, nad czym nie są w stanie zapanować, pod hasłem oczywiście suwerenności narodu. Dodatkowo przeżyją na samym początku wielkie upokorzenie związane z twardym Brexitem, bo to już chyba dla wszystkich wydaje się oczywiste. Innego Brexitu niż twarddy Brexit nie może być po prostu z tego powodu, że w Wielkiej Brytanii nie ma żadnej siły, która byłaby w stanie przedstawić jakiekolwiek warunki, które oni sami są w stanie zaakceptować. Więc do twardego Brexitu dojdzie po prostu dlatego, że oni sami nie zaproponują żadnej innej propozycji, co do której będą w stanie powiedzieć, że oni by tego chcieli. Dziękuję.
I was a policy analyst in the representation of the European Commission in Poland. Very direct question to Eleonora Poli about Italy. Because he said that Salvini is quite marginalized, or really marginalized, being outside the EU political mainstream, which is logical. But okay. Okay, so I will restart because there was no interpretation. You said that Italy is marginalized because being outside, with this government outside the EU political mainstream, but still putting the United Kingdom aside, it is the third among the three biggest member states in the EU. So at the end of the day, it has to have its say about the top positions. So the very simple question is, who of the Spitzenkandidaten for the President of the European Commission would be the most acceptable in Italy? Weber, Timmermans, probably not, but maybe Vestager or somebody else.
Okay, we have a couple of questions, I would say. Eleonora, starting with you, and then let's try to take them all.
Look, I really don't know. I don't want to lie. Really, I don't know. It's the fact is that Salvini is not talking about these things, at least in public, at least in the media. He's not talking about institutions. What he's saying is that we are going to have a new commission, we are going to have a new European Parliament that is going to take into consideration the needs of the Italians, but it's not, doesn't go more concrete than that. So my idea is that it's not going to have a lot of any role, in the decision-making process. Also because it's not in Brussels. It doesn't participate to these kind of meetings, and there's a lack of Italians being there, discussing about the future of the European Union. Even the campaign. So I go to the other question. The European Union was completely, almost absent in the political campaign of the European parliamentary elections. The two non-traditional parties, so the Five-Star Movement and the League, were mostly using, were the one mostly using media, but the League also was very much on the territory. You had Salvini going in every city of Italy, wearing a T-shirt with the name of the city. Very basic communication, but apparently it worked. What he did also was, and I was studying this before, he did this kind of context game on Facebook called Win Salvini. It's very, very basic thing. Basically, if you were one of the first person to like one of his posts, you could win or to meet him or to have a phone call with him. And apparently this was, yes, it was called Win Salvini. Yes, it was an idea, it's quite embarrassing, but it worked. And this was one of the ways to campaign. Yes. Let me say that at least.
there's so many questions. I'm not sure I can answer to all of them. Anyway, just shortly to Vesta, Paul. Yeah, I think there's really people are very much in favor. The citizens are very much in favor of Vestager as a president of the Commission. It's a national pride, being a Dane. But the funny thing is that you see the Eurosceptic Party, the Danish People's Party, saying, according to the rules of the treaty, according to the treaty, she will not represent Denmark. She will represent the whole of Europe. So they're trying to, but all of us, think this is just a Dane. We're in favor of a Dane. So it's, and Brexit, I think, is a big national humiliation of Great Britain. It's a tragedy. I felt sorrow for many weeks after the referendum. I thought it was coming, but now it is there. And I think the tragedy is that there's no compromise. And there's no national compromise appearing in the horizon. And the hardliners say, like Boris Johnson and others, coming into power supposedly, and they're trying to, it's a very difficult game. Anyway, I think higher risk now of a hard Brexit. I think the very important thing is, of course, it also has been a cure for Europe. It has helped Europeans to understand the exit door comes with a high cost. Economically, politically, it's not about taking back control, it's about losing control in a global world. So that's what really, it has been a kind of cure also for Danish citizens. That was a high motive for people actually voting this time. And about engagement in the campaign, I think it's also about how the campaigns were from the mainstream parties. I think it was a double tongue. So one thing I said before, it was about pro-European policies. We are in favor of Europe. It's protecting us. It's creating more security. We need Europe strong to protect ourselves in this world. And it can help us out in some of the biggest crises. But the part is very important. The Social Democrats, in fact, have not learned from Brexit. Not learned from Brexit, I tell you. Because they campaigned on a ground that they said, free movement of labor is a threat to the Danish welfare market. It's causing social dumping. The figures are very clear. About 7.5% of the Danish GDP is related to us being member of the European Union, and especially the access to the single market is core for our economy and export industries. And also those who have been coming into Denmark from other EU countries, from Poland and other places, have been a benefit for the Danish welfare. The contributions to welfare is higher from taxes and VAT is higher than what they get from welfare. So there is a plus on the wealth scale and on the welfare scale of having migrants coming to Denmark, migrant workers from other EU countries. So there's a big surplus. But instead, they campaign on this, that social dumping is a high risk for Denmark. And social dumping is not a high risk for Denmark. There are some few sectors, in the margins of some sectors, that some employers actually are abusing the rules, or people are not having knowledge, information about how the Danish labor market is working. So they abuse some workers, yes. But it's not really the big percentage. The transport sector is a problem. The agricultural sector is a problem. And the building sector is a problem. There have been some problems. But it's not a general problem of social dumping. Most European migrant workers Denmark coming in are getting normalized. They're being members of the trade unions, even though they don't have a tradition. In Poland, many of those coming into Denmark are becoming members of the trade unions. So they're becoming Danes. They work like Danes, even more than Danes. Get less welfare and they work like hell. And in fact, they're very ordinary and law-abiding citizens. So we actually should be in favor of it. The Social Democrat came from this because it feeds into the national election campaign they're having right now. And about the idea of the neoliberal policies destroying Denmark or threatening our welfare. And in fact, if you look upon different studies, there is a benefit from migrant workers in all kinds of welfare models, not even the name. We're not threatened in the Scandinavian welfare model. It's also other countries having a surplus for migrant workers. So they had that double tongue. And the Liberal Party, the government party, he had the Prime Minister. He had he made a metamorphosis. Last year, he started to talk very much in favor of the European Union. He knew the trends among the electorate. He knew that citizens were very much in favor of the European Union. He started to talk a lot about the need for Europe. We want a stronger, harder Europe, nearly. His slogan. That's an old lady slogan as well. Tony Blair's slogan as well. So they start to talk about it. What happened? 1 week before the election, what did he do? We want permanent border controls. He said it. And we want to get the rights back to Denmark, the national right to decide when we will impose national border controls to our biggest export market, Germany. And it's crazy. It's filled with holes in border control. But it was a symbolic move, strategically to target the skeptic movers. And that feeds into the problem as how to create engagement and citizens that really engage in European policies, not only at the superficial, but also in depth. And the biggest problem, I think, is that some of our political leaders are still playing with this double thing about Europe and nation state sovereignty, etc. kind of game. And they haven't understood the real depth of the need of a strong Europe.
Okay. Let me please make a short remark on what you said before on the migration issue. It might be that migration on an aggregate level creates overall wealth. This might well be, but I'm not sure this wealth is always evenly distributed. And I'm not sure about this, and because I think that some groups, especially blue-collar laborers, blue-collar workers, are losing out from migrant work. So therefore, I think there might be a point in managing migration, in my view, unless we manage to spread the wealth gains evenly. And I think in this dimension, we are still failing all over Europe, and we need to tackle this issue. But this is only on this topic. I want to make one comment on the one person who asked about social inequality being a big issue still in Europe. I agree, yes, it is a very big issue, but the problem is I'm not sure if Europe can handle this problem. Because if you look at national polls, you see that people want to have the question of how the welfare states should look like. These topics should be handled on the national level and not on the European level, because people are afraid that if Brussels get too many competences in this field, it might be some redistribution among countries. So Germans or Danes, they have to pay for the Italians and so on, and this creates a lot of resentment. And therefore, I think the matter of social inequality needs still to be tackled mostly on a national level. And I'm strongly pro-European, trust me on that, but I think if we try to shift too many of the competences on national welfare systems on the EU level, this will create a backlash. This is only my personal opinion, but I'm convinced about this, and I only want to say that so we can think about it. What the EU can do against social inequality is that we have to find ways how we can restart growth in Southern Europe, how we can restructure debt, how can we just achieve a higher growth of welfare. But I think putting the matter of redistribution on the Brussels level would be very difficult, and I think it's not going to work. And one last remark on if the higher turnout will translate into higher political engagement in Europe. I must say I was personally very, very disappointed by the campaign we had in Germany by more or less all parties, because it were extremely shallow campaigns. They were all narrowed down to the question, do you want more Europe or do you want less Europe? But this is not the real question which is at stake. But the real question is, what kind of Europe do we want? And if we get into the details, then I think this becomes a much more difficult question, and we will have a lot of varying opinions on that, and even conflicting opinions on that. So it might translate into more engagement, because we have seen demonstrations of people saying we want a stronger Europe, we want Europe to stay together. But then again, it's also a sort of shallow engagement that for some reason shuns the very difficult questions. And I think at the moment when we come to discuss this very difficult questions like how much redistribution do we want to have in a transfer union, for example. Let's see if this increased engagement will hold up then in this situation.
Yes, once again, I think it's a very important question whether increased turnout is a reason why we shouldn't call European elections second-order elections. And I tend to agree with Agata that it's not enough. And it's true that in Poland turnout more than doubled, or almost doubled actually. But in terms of the choices that people were making, it was not pro against Europe, even though the opposition actually made an effort to make it about Europe. But this effort, to me, failed. Why people were mobilized? Big cities were one driver of mobilization, and they were mobilized because they want this government out. And it's as simple as that. Whereas in rural areas and small towns, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, people mobilized in defense of their government, which they believe defends their very crucial interests, the way they see it themselves. I think that if you ask about agents of mobilization, special mention should be given to parish priests, who basically made a large contribution by allowing law and justice candidates to basically cover their churches' fences with their electoral billboards and encouraged people to go out. That they didn't even have to tell people whom to vote for, because it was quite obvious in some of these areas that there is only one party they should be supporting. And there is a very great story in last week's Politica Weekly about one municipality which had the highest vote for Law and Justice Party and how the electoral campaign looked there. I mean, it's very, very educational to read about it. So once again, it's quite. I mean, there are some good signs. I mean, what I consider very encouraging is paradoxically the fact that despite the warnings after 4 years of the conflict between the government, with the quite popular government in Brussels, the support for European Union did not drop. Probably Brexit's failure is part of the story, but it's not the whole story. I mean, people generally enjoyed the economic prosperity, which started to accelerate once we joined the EU, not once we had this government, but that's a much longer term process. And therefore I'm also quite skeptical about when I hear that economic inequality is a big concern in this part of Europe. I mean, our society has a very specific definition of economic equality. It means that every person thinks that she or he should be earning more money. That's our pragmatic definition, which again the ruling party has been very keen to tap into it, but it hardly translates into policies on European level, into serious policy debates.
Yes. I would love to answer one question about Italy and your question. I think that yes, there is a lot on the plate when it comes to the EU about concerning Salvini propaganda. But I think even though it's not going to be able to achieve what he kind of promised, it's going to use this to fuel his anti-European rhetoric. He will say that basically the EU is not respecting the vote of Italian citizens, the EU is not respecting Italy, and blah blah blah. So what is going to really hurt the party and the government is going to be based on their capacity to do the reforms needed at the national level. So, economic reforms, migration policy. The migration policy as implemented is not sustainable. You cannot just close ports and believe that migrants will not come. It is not sustainable in the long term. So these are going to be the issues that are going to make this government fail. But what's going to happen next, I think, is going to be worse. So I don't see any positive scenario. And I just want to make a comment on what you just said on welfare. Of course, the fear of Northern European countries that having a European welfare system is going to be very difficult for Northern European citizens to accept. my perspective is a bit different. I think we need, apart from welfare, we need to have something coming directly from European institutions, because although it's true that anti-European parties did not win, we have a growing trend of anti-European rhetoric. And this is something that we need to take into consideration. It's not dangerous at the moment. Still, it's something. And just believing that nothing happened, it's not going to be a winning strategy in the long term. So we need to have like a positive image of the European Union. I think one way is to have the European Union giving something to the citizens directly. It could be welfare, it could be something else. But we need, direct action like from Europe to the citizens, because at the moment it's still perceived as something that is Brussels bubble.
Thank you. And now we have still many comments, and we still haven't answered all the questions, and there are still some questions in the room, but we're running out of time. So if there are any very, very important questions that you really want to ask, short question. Yes, please.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to talk about what happened in France, because we don't have a French representative here. And France is a very important country. I don't know how the game will be run for the next 5 years. So the yellow vest issue, gilets jaunes, actually, I think that could explain to us what will be our problem in Europe for the next 5 years. Because we can talk about progressive green politics, and it's a very good rhetoric, but I don't think that we agree, all of us, what we are putting inside this term. What means progressive green politics? There are different ways to do green politics. And actually, gilets jaunes issue showed that the real issue is not only to say we need to change our model, etc. The thing is, who's going to pay about that? And in France, what happened is that the working classes and the low middle class people said that we cannot take all the burden of the tax reform concerning climate change policies. And that's why we had all this big social mobilization that is very fragile because of the police violence that Macron tried to put very clearly. And so actually the movement now has not the strength it had at the beginning. But the thing, this is the real issue, is because liberals, they can talk about green politics, but it's not the same social democrats or the radical left talks about that. So we are not agree about the content of the policy. So this is also to relate to what you said, that inequality should be tackled at the national level. I'm not sure about that. I'm Greek. So when Germany buys all the public infrastructures in Greece, okay, airports, all the ports, France, and then we have also a very specific budgetary policy that we should apply. And so actually, and directly, Germany said to us what kind should be our minimum salary. It's impossible to have a national inequality policy. So the problem, I think, in my view, is that the German social democracy doesn't want to tackle this issue. And so we can have coalitions for the next 5 years between conservatives, the liberals, the Greens, or even the Social Democrats. But if we don't understand that the problem is that we should, let's say, decide what will be the content of our policies. So the German Social Democrats will decide they are going to be from the left side or from the right side. This is the issue, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it was rather a comment than a question. I will leave it like that because we're really out of time now. I would like to thank you very much, our guests coming from so great countries to share your comments on the elections results. Thank you, Jacek. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our interpreters for the great job. And one question to my colleagues from EPIN, please stay for a while. I will just tell you what's going on today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming.